Welcome to episode 28 of It's Server Time. We have a very special guest today. It is Snappi, the in-game leader of ENCE. And I am so bored of recaps. I'm so done with recaps. We're going to talk the meta. We're going to talk about the meta of pro CS right now. We're going to get Snappi's opinions on it. And so let's just kick it off. Let's just start already. God damn it, let's go. Okay, it's been 5 months since grenades have been droppable. Snappi, how do you think this has affected the meta?
It definitely has affected the meta. I would say that especially on maps like Inferno, we don't play it. But also, like, counting nades is kind of like just can't do it anymore. Like on overpass, usually the CT will have 4 smokes for monster, whereas before they would have 3, or you would at least see one of them coming from A. So it definitely has affected quite a bit the grenade dropping. I would say the silencer has definitely affected way more, but the
We'll get
grenade
into the
dropping
silencer.
has.
We'll do the
Okay.
silencer too. We'll do the
Now, it
silencer.
obviously has created some tactical things you can do, but I also think it has. I don't really think it's necessarily a great update because it also makes the game harder to read in a way that is random. It's random sometimes. You just don't know if there's free. You can't rely on communicating. Oh, they use 3 smokes here. They use 4 smokes here. Like, we should be able to do this now. Like, now it's a bit more. You're guessing kind of, or you're like you have to kind of look into the counter. Like, do they drop nades for this guy? What, like, how do they do these things, right? So I think yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's different. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's terrible either.
Okay, let's. I want to open it up to everybody else here, of course. And what have you guys thought from? Has it changed your guys' experiences as spectators? And I guess this would go more to Node and Pronogo. I mean, Mix. I'll get to you also, but for Node and Pronogo, when you guys are watching games, does it feel like the grenade dropping has a significant impact on how, I guess, the story of the game is told or anything?
Not particularly, I'd say. I think there's obviously occasions where the commentators will call out stuff like there's nades dropped in CT for them to stack cat on Dust 2, or there's teams dropping smokes and mollies on Inferno as they rotate. But in terms of just watching regular matches, I don't think it's changed too much. Usually, if there's anything major, it'll get called out by the commentators now, especially, which is good for the regular casual viewer, I guess. Um, for me, I guess, obviously playing the game, I can see that it's had an impact on a lot of things. Like counting nades, like Snappi was saying, is a lot harder than it used to be, and you basically can't really do it anymore. But based on everyone's initial reaction when the update first came out, I definitely think that it was a bit of an exaggeration in terms of how large of an impact it would have on the game. It's obviously changed stuff that we used to be able to do, but it's not breaking the game necessarily like people thought it initially would, for sure.
Yeah, it's not one of those things that massively changed it to the point where it's a completely different game. But I'll say, bearing in mind that you already have this disconnect, as like CSGO has intuitive aspects to it, just if you've never played it before and you're just turning it on. And again, we're not necessarily supposed to balance the game around people who've never played it, obviously. But when you look at the esports like spectator point of view, you left click on somebody's head, they die. That's pretty intuitive. The guns, they're grounded in the real world. It's not some weird stuff like in Valorant, and it's not something completely different like in Overwatch. Like, you kind of understand what the guns do. However, one thing that's definitely different is, I mean, the smoke lineups or the nade lineups in general, you don't really know why somebody goes to this spot and aims at this pixel and then like jumps at the right angle. And, that gets so in the weeds for the average person who's maybe not familiar or hasn't played in nearly close to this high level or at all even. And so I think that probably holds the game back a little bit from a spectator side, because you do need somebody to explain maybe a beginner's, a different stream entirely. This is something that in League of Legends they had at the World Championship, where for the World Finals, I think, they had like a dedicated beginner friendly, hey, you've never seen League before, we're going to explain everything, because they knew
they did that for
obviously
Dota as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe CS:GO could benefit from that if it wants to start expanding its audience, because you do need to explain why this is so important, because every game has T sides going into certain areas and throwing nades in that. In that sense, I think it didn't really change anything in the sense that people still do that, but now you have another layer of things that it might be intuitive once you start to build an understanding of the mechanics, but you don't really understand it initially, and that needs to be explained. One thing that I thought was nice about this IEM Katowice tournament that just went on is that they actually had it on the HUD. They had drop nades with the colors of the team, so you'd see a blue nade for CT. That was really useful because, I mean, at first I had to really look closely because I thought it was like a dead player or something, but when you figure out what those symbols are, if we can get it to be even more clear visually, then that way we can start to tell people, oh, you start to see this trend of like people storing them in, B side
stockpile of nades. Yeah.
And I think that was really nice. So I think, as you said earlier, we're only 5 months into this. It's still kind of early days. The tournaments are going to get better tools to spectate this and tell work these into storylines or just general commentary. People are going to get better at it. To Note's point, obviously when the initial reaction happened, people were like, oh, you can just one-man fake A on Mirage, everybody pops up B. However, obviously you have the delay in nade throwing for one person to do it, and you can kind of map that out. I'm kind of surprised I haven't seen teams try this. Where
I wanted to ask Mix about this
Go
part,
ahead.
actually.
We'll segue in.
Yeah, Mix. Like, okay, so for like T side fakes and stuff, have you been noticing too much or anything? Like, I guess Snappi, chime in too if you want on this one, but it kind of feels like the T side element of this hasn't been like as recognized maybe as it could. Do you think there's more potential for this, Mix?
Yeah, like I thought it would almost change more than it did. At least at the moment. So like, say on Dust 2, before I could easily tell when someone's going to like flash or is like faking a flash, because like typically in like a Dust 2 T side default, whoever's like the long guy will just go over and like flash a couple times at like usually at the start of every round, maybe use like a little fake. And so I've seen some teams try to like, they'll give that guy like 3 or 4 flashes instead, so he can like more like flesh out like kind of fake. But like you said, like it doesn't really work that well, because if someone's doing that, I can typically kind of tell just by like the timing of like the flashes. Like I can tell my team that I'll tell my team to look out for like these specific areas where someone might just be like stacking their own nades or something, so that you're not like biting on it too much. But I almost thought it would change it more than it has, because like you said, on like Mirage, you can't just like throw a one-man fake because the timing doesn't work. Like it'll be super obvious that it's just one person throwing all the nades. But there are like good.
I actually think you can do a lot of these things, to be honest. Like, and I have seen it when I watch demos. Like, because what we do, for example, if we want to do a one-man fake, is we go on the server and we obviously have a theory server where we see how long the smoke is in the air before it blooms, right? And by doing that, you can pretty much throw 2 or 3 smokes that land at the same time by just throwing them on different lineups, but from the same place. But you throw one lower, so it hits the ground earlier, and then you throw one higher. And another team we've seen doing this, and this was the most crazy example we've seen of it, and that was like our coach who did like a counter on Navi on Nuke at Katowice. And then he showed a round where they went secret, and then first Bit would blow up the door. He would molly main. Then he would go on roof. He would molly default, double flash. Then he would go down, pick up a smoke, do smoke for door. Then he would go again up, molly top hot, flash. Then he would get a new smoke main.
Jesus Christ.
Oh
and at the same time, they had the G2, like free smoke from main to secret. And they would be 4 guys down secret, while they had left 2 smokes, 3 mollies, and flashes for Bit. And he would just do all these crazy distractions. And the whole time they were just 4 secret. So it has been used in pro play. And I think it's being used a lot more than what people think. The difference is it's just one person usually throwing 2 grenade sets. So it could be jungle plus stairs, jungle plus top con, and then you just throw it so that one is 6.5 seconds and the other is 8 seconds, and then they land at the same time. But that is the main way it's used. This was the other one was an extreme example. That's not normal. But, but it can. But also because it can get so confusing if you start doing this and smokes are rolling. So suddenly you can't find the smoke. So it's obviously not that easy to always do these things. But it is used, but obviously not game breaking.
Yeah, I'd say like.
Okay,
it didn't change the game completely like I thought it might. Like for like a smaller example that I would use, like maybe on like one of my teams, right? Is like typically on Inferno Banana, like you throw like the smoke and then like one molly, and then usually like the second person maybe like a few seconds later would throw like the close molly, or like they would throw the other molly. And in that case, you could do something where, that the other B player has like 2 mollies, so he can like fake by himself, and then maybe you're playing like a 4 mid setup or something, right? And then that's like kind of like a smaller way you can like use that to your advantage. And then like you said, like with like the throwing all the nades at like hut like towards A, like while they're down secret, that's like another really smart way of like using it. And it's also really difficult because you probably could like go back between a demo and look at like the difference between a normal like Navi upper execute and when like Bit is like just like faking it by himself, right? And you'd be able to like most likely tell a difference. And you could like kind of like spot that like in the pregame.
Snappy, has that happened to you guys in a match before where you were like, okay, we know it's a single guy throwing all these fake nades? Yeah, have you made the live
I mean,
read?
especially not so much now because people have gotten better at using it, so it's more hidden. But at the start, just when it came out, there was just stupid examples of it. Like where you smoke, like this Mirage example where they fucking throw 6 flashes over or something. Just like it's a fake. I'm just standing on B, like, yeah, bro. I can just hear the flashes popping one by one on A, and you just know that it's a weak fake, right? But now it's a lot harder to tell because people have gotten better at hiding how many they are. And again, like as I said, like there was this nuke example, but also another nuke example is you see a lot of teams now where it's just one player throwing the smoke walls. He just has 2 or 3 smokes laying around, and he just throw one of the 3 different smoke walls. Just picks up the smoke. Simple does that, and Perfect also does that in Navi, for example. Both of them do smoke walls, but single-handedly instead.
Okay, let's talk about it in respect to the top teams in the world. Do you think, like, this is open for everybody, that the best teams in the world, so I am talking pretty much the playoff teams at Katowice, G2, FaZe, Navi, etc., Heroic. Do you think these teams are on top of this meta, or are there teams like Snappi, maybe ones you're playing against, or anybody seen that are using these nades to a better effect than what the best teams are doing?
I think Navi was the best example we saw, but that was on a map like Nuke. Like I didn't see it in all other maps. Like I think everyone is kind of like maybe I didn't see anyone stand out, but with Navi I saw it particularly on Nuke where they used it a lot, right?
You think it's fair to say that Alexi B was? I mean, I think we all kind of saw that early incident where on Dust 2 they threw all the nades for him. He got 1,000 nade damage.
Yeah.
Is he still on top of that meta for G2 today, or do you think other teams passed him up?
I don't know. Like this nade thing was kind of done in preg also before Alexi even did it, right? So it was not like it was anything major as a pro player when you saw. Like obviously the 1,000 damage was impressive, regardless, right? But you knew that you would stack nades. You also knew that people drop nades and spawn now, so the A retakes, they would just keep nading the bomb, and if you boosted a guy, like it was common even before, even though it had only been out for like a couple of weeks maybe. But no, like I think from what I've seen, most teams are on the same level. You can also kind of make it too complicated at times, and then you just confuse yourself. That is what we have tried a couple of times, where it just gets too complicated, and suddenly the guy can't find the smoke that was dropped for him, and just run around like a headless chicken 10 seconds, like looking for a smoke. And at that point, it's probably counterproductive. So you have to also keep it simple enough that it can be executed right.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'll just say that it feels like an obvious change that Valve could make that would improve the consistency of these if they want nades to be droppable in that sense. Is probably make it so that they don't roll around as easily, especially smokes, I think. I don't know. Maybe there can be more spots where there's enough of an incline you can throw them in a basket. It kind of feels weird to hard code that into a map on that level where it's like literally these spots are your nade spots. But something like that would be better. I recall there was an old nip strat on Inferno in alt mid where they would chuck stuff up on a roof and they would boost somebody up there. And I think it was Device was sometimes doing this where you'd have a whole B or A exec, from that spot. Stuff like that is interesting and it's nice to see that. But I do feel like a lot of teams get sort of stuck in a rut. And this goes beyond just this strategy or this element. It feels like a lot of teams just like, oh, this team's doing this, I'll do that. And I'm sure there's plenty of cases like Snappi was saying, they go into their theory server and they have their own ideas and they test some stuff out and then they bring some strats up. But it feels like, and maybe this is just me not looking closely enough, for Inferno, it's a big case where it's like a lot of teams are just, they always put the nades in the same general areas on CT side, and it always seems to work out in roughly the same way. At some point it's about how you throw them, but for the most part it's like, okay, as long as we have excess money, we can stash nades by B, and we can maybe leave one person there sometimes. The default is obviously 2. Maybe you send 3 to start just so that they can do it. We've seen juggling nades before. It feels like that's kind of the way the meta has developed in that sense. One thing I've always believed is that Inferno is kind of a whack map in that you live and die by banana, and it's so like utility heavy on a good day. Before this change, it was really about like how much utility damage do you get. I feel like this change has exposed maps that have that sort of like rote design into it, where essentially teams have solved the map, the approach. We must do this and then that. And the other example is obviously like that overpass incendiary towards playground, where it's like you have to throw that on CT side because the opportunity cost of not throwing it is super high. There's not another spot you can throw that incendiary that would be, giving you a better strategy elsewhere, right? A different approach. It feels very much like if you don't do this, you fall behind in some way. And then there you are, you're stuck. So I would like to see some changes to the maps as well to help make this change more interestingly deployed, because right now it does feel like it's kind of stale in that respect, and we're only a couple months in. But that's my opinion.
Are we good on the nade topic? We good on actually one last final question then about the nade stuff. Would you guys like to just see sticky drop nades? Like Snappi said, it rolls around sometimes. What if the nade just stuck where you dropped it, so this kind of stuff wouldn't happen? Is that a good change, or is that a bad change?
I mean,
good or bad?
I feel like if they're gonna implement this like dropping change, you might as well just make it so they just stick. Like I don't know,
I
just
agree.
adding the rolling thing just adds like an unnecessary layer of like complicatedness to it.
Okay. All right. That was.
I'd still like to see them get like blown by nades and whatnot, but being stuck to the ground would be good in terms of just not rolling.
If you could shoot, you would still want to be able to shoot them to note, or what?
Yeah. I think still shooting them and being able to nade them away would still be.
Yeah, but maybe just do it so the
stick.
smoke doesn't roll 10 meters.
Yeah, exactly.
Uphill or something like that.
The best ones are the ones where you see them on Vertigo get dropped in spawn, and you just see during the freeze time them slowly roll off the map.
Oh my god. And then all of the T's tracking it as it slowly drifts off, and they're like, God damn it.
If there's a timeout and then they throw the nade too early in the timeout, oh my god. Just seeing $300 fall off the map. Okay, let's talk about another meta change. Snappi already alluded to it. The A1-s. So my general question is, how has the A1-s become too powerful? Because I'm just gonna say I think it's too powerful. I think in some respect right now it's too strong. What are your guys' identifications for like why is this the case? Why is the A1-s breaking the game a little bit?
I mean, first of all, it shouldn't be the cheapest M4 at this point. Like, they should just swap the price point of the A1 and the A1s, or the A4 and the A1s. I mean, there's no point in having it be 2,900 when it's already clearly the most impactful TT weapon. Not to mention, like, the fire rate and the silencer combined with just the way that teams are playing with utility right now makes it far too easy for people to just spam nonstop through smokes into very common angles, and it's just making it absolutely CT sided to the point that I think every single map is at least 55 45, if not 60-40 CT sided, which is just I don't find that as enjoyable to watch at this point either.
I mean, the silencer is more OP than the AUG was, and I don't even think that's a question at this point, because there's multiple factors. First of all, even before the M4A1-s had more damage, the M4A4 was the same close distance, but the thing is the decrease on the M4A1-s was 1%, while it was 3% on the A1A4. So that meant that on maps like Train, you could kill a guy with 5 bullets from long distance, and the M4A4 would take 6 bullets. Now they changed it. There's still only 1% decrease on the silencer, but they made it so that 4 bullets will kill no matter the distance, pretty much. Not only that, the rate of fire is slow, so the recoil is super easy to control. Also, there's no tracers through smokes, which makes it impossible to spam back. And there is no weapon to counter it like there was an SG. So the M4A1-s is way more overpowered than the AUG ever was, in my opinion. And that is why it's so broken.
Now that you said it, I was gonna say like the A1S is literally more of a laser gun than even an AUG with a scope was. Like it's actually ridiculous.
You had to hit 5 bullets with that gun. Now you have to hit 4.
Because there's no recoil. Like that, controlling an A1S is so easy. Like I could still just hop back in and just body spray people all day. Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no way that it's just mega overpowered.
Yeah.
I would rather want an M4 than an AK.
Wow, okay. Yeah, that's another thing that came up. I don't know if you guys saw this thread on Reddit, but there was a thread going up during, I think it was the final of Katowice, where they were like, CTs, A1S is overpowered, also CTs. And it was like a screenshot of just 4 AKs and an AWP on the CT side because they had just salvaged that many. I feel like that's just because of that one.
I mean, obviously, it's also mapped position dependent, but if I'm playing Banana and Inferno as CT, I much rather want a silencer to spam smokes because they can't spam me back, and that's the big difference.
Yeah, well, they can. It just has to be lucky. That's the thing.
Yeah, but the thing is, they don't have any traces to go by, and the sound is like the silencer is so, like it's so hard to hear in distance, so it's hard to even spray back due to the sound.
I think Vertigo's fights have especially just like the ramp spams and stuff. Oh my, dude, the A1S is just so gross there in comparison to the AK.
The joke is that every map is now the old Vertigo, where everything was a spam through that wooden wall before they swapped it out for the metal. Like that's the joke now, is that everybody's spamming through smokes, through stuff they can't see. And that's the thing is, like, I know the players probably are tired of that, but you have to think about it in a more objective sense. Like, oh, I have to find a way to be successful in this meta. But as a spectator, man, I am so out on watching like smoke fight after smoke fight. And I know that's, maybe that's an unpopular opinion. I don't know. It just feels like, it's exciting when it happens once in a blue moon. And now it's like, everybody attempting on the CT side to spam through smokes because there's not really much punishment. And maybe the tracers have to come back for that gun. I don't know. Maybe that would be something that at the pro level, you'd see a big amount of change. Maybe at the matchmaking level, you probably wouldn't see too many people even notice that. That would probably help it. I don't know, man. That just seems like one of the obvious things to do. People have been talking about price updates as well. I also think that Thor made a point on a show that I haven't released yet that talks about the A1S basically camouflaging how bad the economy is for CTs because the A1S is really powerful and it's cheaper. I agree with that point, generally speaking, and I think that really what we want to see is instead of, again, camoing the lack of economic stability, you just have a reasonable economy, which, again, that's a loaded term. I have no idea what exactly you would do to change it right now. But you do something to change the economy to be in a more healthy state, and then you don't have to worry about an OP gun on one side.
So would you guys, well, okay, let's get down to what we think would be the proper change for it right now. I feel like the comment, I think one of the most common ideas is to just switch the price of the A4 and A1S. But do you guys think that is enough anymore?
Not enough. That's the problem. Like it's one change, but there has to be something else that goes with it because it's just way too overpowered. That a $200 price point change won't do anything really. Teams are still just going to buy the A1S.
To me, they literally just need to revert it back. Like one of the things that with the price decrease, players were actually starting to lean towards the silencer. I'm not saying that it was like there was still more players using A4, but still. There was with 2900, you saw a lot of players starting to actually use the silencer. Had they maybe decreased it 100 more, it would maybe even go to 50-50 with the pro players who was using an A4 and who was using the A1S, right? So they were so close to having it balanced, and then they just buffed the damage to a point where it was just broken.
Yeah,
because it's not even about aim with the gun.
Yes.
You just put 4 bullets wherever you want, and that's it.
It was like the first time that I've actually seen teams actually have a distribution of A4 and A1S, like the period that you're talking about, where it was somewhat balanced in terms of the productivity in each gun. That was probably the first time in the last 7 years of watching the game that I've seen teams actually have some players would use the A4, some players would have the A1S, and that's sort of what I'd like to see. Like that's the end goal in terms of the distribution of guns, because it's sort of nice having that variety and seeing teams sort of change it up, and even just watching matches makes it a little bit more fun to see teams sort of play differently based on what they have. The fact that they buffed one just way out of proportion to the other is just, it makes no sense, to the point where I actually think I agree with you. Just reduce the fire rate buff that they did, or the damage buff, actually.
It's the damage buff. That's the key
yeah.
one, right?
And if they do that, they don't really have to touch the price point then. And that honestly will just bring it back in line. And also the fact that they've overdone it now, with the number of teams that have and players who've just gotten used to using the A1S, even if they reduce that damage buff, I think we'd see that that 50-50 distribution actually get closer, just because teams are going to be used to using the A1S now.
Yeah, it just seems
Yeah, I
like
think
such
so
an
too.
elementary evaluation to make as a developer, where you just look at it and you think like, okay, what are the reasons I would not buy the A1S at this point? And there aren't, like, I have to be in a corner where my gun barrel will stick up. Like, that's the only thing I can think of. I'm a really good, like, 2-bullet headshotter. Okay, well, maybe, because then you get a fraction of a second faster. But, you know, you get the element of surprise, you get the more damage no matter what you hit. You get, like there's so much that you get, and it's cheaper. A cheaper gun is the better gun. Okay, man, come on. Like,
Why do you guys think Navi had simple, I think, bit, and I think, was it Perfecto or was it electronic? Or three of them were
Yeah,
using the
Perfecto.
A4
We
for
spoke
some.
about it.
Why-
We were like,
why?
they're just
Thinking
trying to
about
play on
those.
hard mode now or something
Yeah,
like that.
is that they're just bored?
Dude,
Uh,
there's always those people that do that.
No,
Like,
I mean,
one gun-
simple unsilences his USP every time, basically, too, which is just another thing that's just objectively worse, right? So.
yeah, the
mixed
one
it
time
down.
Valve watches a pro match, they're like, wow, see, it is used. We don't have to remove it at all.
Oh,
Fuck
no.
off, Simple. Come on, man.
I mean,
Wait,
at the end of the day,
yeah.
sometimes players will just feel comfortable with a gun and they'll just use it, because I don't know, you
just feeling.
they'll whiff one spray with an A1 and then they'll instantly switch back to the A4.
There is a thing with players where something is just objectively worse, but it's more comfortable, and then
The
they
UMP,
just-
for example.
yeah, the UMP, for example.
Like
Is there-
Nika using the AK for the entire SG era.
Oh my god, yeah, and I
Shout
think
out
Rain
Nico.
and Nico were just pretty much never switched until the bitter end. I don't think Rain ever switched. I think Nico eventually did switch, but okay. So I think, like, is this a fair statement to make that for the A1S, if you just if you reverted it back to the old damage values, that it would be in a good place even at 2900, or would you want to see?
I think so.
Okay, all right, just
Maybe
damage.
2800, but yeah, something like that. It would be fine in my opinion.
That's the thing, though, is that I don't think that's what's going to happen, and that's a separate question. I agree that it would probably be fine. We'd go back to that, promised land of a 50-50-ish distribution. The Valve, as they noted with the AUG and the Krieg changes that they made, they don't really deal in, like, these small incremental changes and then giving them enough time to actually have breathing room. No, what you'll get is the Krieg nerf into the ground. Almost nobody uses it now. It's very hyper specialized. Instead of being like a legitimate upgrade, but not as broken over the AK-47. I think that's what's going to happen with the M4A1-s, but hopefully I'm wrong, because it would be nice to have a legitimate choice. Also, why do I have to equip it in and out of game menu? Valve, please fix.
Yeah, that's a bummer that they haven't fixed that one out. Okay,
AM throws out a great troll suggestion, which is
What?
just put a silencer on the AK.
yeah, why not? Huh?
Spam
That would be
wars.
just the most busted gun ever. That would just straight up be so overpowered. And the game would just suck to watch because it would just become spam wars at the end of the day. Counter spam globally offended, globally turning the game off and not watching anymore.
Globally going to Valorant. Bye.
Yeah, but people still pick the Vandal though. Okay, so I wanted to kind of like segue this into an idea where, okay, so Ancient is just incredibly CT sided. To me, it's become actually literally just boring. It's kind of boring to watch for me nowadays. There's some elements where people have their little flair, their spin on it, but if they did the A1S nerf that we just talked about, would Ancient, like, how much better does Ancient get, or like what else? Okay, first of all, how much better does Ancient get if there's this A1S nerf?
Maybe a little bit better, but not that much.
just a little better. Just
Yeah.
I don't think the core
Honestly.
issue is the rifles. I think the core issue is the CT spawn positions they have no way to fall back into defensive spots that are like on other maps by comparison. So you need to take map control super early, which also is facilitated by all the nade lineups you can do and all that stuff. But then the Ts have nowhere to go either, so then they're kind of stuck. And you basically just get this like weird trench no man's land, and then when a T does break through, now the CTs have to like it's instantly forced into a retake. There's no like, you know, mirage middle where you can take fights, fall back into the bomb site. It's like you're already in the bomb site when you're falling back on the CT side. That's I'm interested in what Snappi thinks though, because he's obviously been playing the map. So
yeah, Snappi, you guys don't. I don't think you don't first pick it, but you let it through. I mean, it's one of the maps in your pool, right? So
yeah, I mean, we haven't
what are your
been that
thoughts?
strong on it lately. I mean, I think we've
You guys
lost a
lost
few
to
maps.
Godsent on it, so
Yeah, after
yeah.
double overtime, and I think we lost to Astralis 16-30. It's not like a terrible map, but we have had some pretty bad losses on it. And to be honest, we have played really bad on it, which we have looked into the last few days in order to strengthen that particular map, because it's obviously a weakness at the moment. But I think the map has some issues. And one of them, like, it doesn't look like a CS map. If you look like the cave, there's 2 rooms in cave.
Mhm.
On what map do you have a corridor where you can't really check right and left? And it's
Yeah.
so weird. And then another position that's just broken is donut. You can't molly anyone out because you can't really get the molly behind the wall so that they actually are forced out. And then on top of that, you can't plant the bomb on A. You can't really plant it on B either. That's sometimes
No.
forgotten. You can't
So
plant it on
trash.
B either, because if the T has a guy on long, he can spam the entire area, so leaving you to plant in one single position. And if you do not have cave, that area also gets spammed. So to me, and that is, by the way, a silencer thing partly, that you can just stand and spam, and you're not worried about spams back to you. But I do think it has some issues, and I think obviously the donut area, that actually needs to be changed in my
Yeah.
opinion. And then
Same.
they could either put it like just move it like a bit left or right, so that it doesn't go straight into the A bomb planting area. Because the problem on A is you have to be careful of 3 different areas: temple, spawn, and donut. There should only be 2 areas you can get shot from. Then you can block one and you can concentrate on fighting the other. But in this particular case, you just have nowhere to stand. Even if you smoke off donut, you still get shot from a guy who jumps up on that little ledge in donut and just like lasers you, because it's so easy to hear the bomb plant. He has a silencer. Again, you can barely shoot back. Because also, if you start shooting back, then the CT guy and start spamming you, the temple guy. It's a bad map, to be honest. I like the map only because it's a new map, and I like to play new maps.
Yeah, true.
So in general, every time there's a new map, I like it. But it's not a good map. Like Nuke is a good map. I think.
Do you think it's better than Vertigo? You think
No,
Vertigo's better?
I think Vertigo is better.
Okay, I agree. I actually agree with that.
Yeah.
I'd probably agree, but I still hate Vertigo more.
I hate
Let's
Vertigo
get
a
'em
lot,
both
but I
out.
don't hate it. I hate Ancient. I realize I hate Ancient more. I actually do hate Ancient more.
But I do think Dust 2 is still probably the worst map.
Get 'em
Do you
all out.
think Do you think Dust 2 is worse than Ancient?
I think
Actually,
it's a very bad and poor map and boring map at this point. It's the same over. Like they changed it so that the CT, so it got mega CT sided, but to me it's a pretty boring map. Like the thing that was partly good about those 2 was that you could kind of read rotations. Now you can't read rotations.
right. Yeah, reading rotations made it one of those just kind of built-in T-sided things, but I kind of want to just essentialize what I think is the problem with Ancient, which is just it kind of just is like early Valorant maps where everywhere you walk, it's just another 50-50 angle that you have to clear. Like you have to left, right all the time, and there's just simply not enough utility in Counter-Strike to go through 50-50s all the time like that. And Mix, what do you think of Ancient? What do you think of it?
I was gonna say, to add to that, like all the individual spots are like 50-50, and that makes like the general map control almost feel like 50-50. Like in terms of like mid, when you're a T, right? The only way CTs are going to fight you is if they're just like hard committed. So they're either like they're holding W and they're like fighting you like at the mid entrance, or they're like playing some type of setup where they have to play like in mid because you can't like sort of like fight outside of mid. You know, that's not how really your choke points work. And it's like a similar thing with A, where it's like just like that A main area, and then you're straight out onto like one choke point on site. And with B, it's like you can kind of work a bit more in terms of like taking cave control maybe, or maybe like kind of working the ramp. But even those areas are so like small and just so like, you know, you're not like actually taking nap control anywhere. It feels like it's very hard to like actually condition people over like a T side half in any like meaningful way. Like obviously you can still like change things up and you can still like do like fakes and stuff, like, you know, maybe you can like fake mid and B control and you're just like walking out A main, but the options in general just feel like very limited compared to like a map like Overpass or Nuke or something. It just feels very all or nothing in terms of the strats and the map control you take.
Okay. I want to hear notes, because I know Pronogo, I know you're gonna have a lot of ideas because you do a lot of mapping. But no, what's your general take on Ancient?
I mean, I just don't find it enjoyable to watch. I don't think there's much like more to be said in terms of I don't know. For me at least, the original Vertigo, we knew that they were constantly making updates and trying to make it better. Like every couple of months there was a new change that would sort of change the way it was played. Teams were sort of adapting, and that made it at least enjoyable to sort of peek into and see what teams are doing now, and it progressively got better. Ancient's been out for quite a while now, and it's just like they made a couple of updates initially, and then since then it's sort of just been like no change at all. And for me, that just doesn't make it fun because it seems like they're almost satisfied with what the map is in its current state, and it's just not enjoyable to watch because it ends up being either the same sort of round every time where teams are sort of getting that outer B control on T side and then they're just sitting there for the next 50 seconds while CTs just bleed all of their nades. Or they're sort of just like running into mid and then splitting donut or lurking someone into red room. I don't know. I don't know what to make of it just because most other maps, at some point, you can sort of tell what team is going to come out on top of a certain round, whereas Ancient, there's just weird timings on CT side and weird positions that players get 3 kills where they really shouldn't, like they wouldn't in any other map.
Yeah.
But they're just sitting in spots where you have to clear like 4 different angles at the same time, so they're going to get at least 2, and then it's sort of a lottery for the 3rd kill. So yeah, I personally would rather see substantial changes come in. I don't necessarily want to see it removed just because I do like seeing new maps in the pool and stuff play out differently, but changes definitely have to come in. To Snappi's point, I'd love to see like minus Dust 2 and plus Train or something. That would be honestly an ideal change for me because I also don't really like Dust 2 at all. So that would be a perfect sort of transition. And then teams could honestly ban Ancient if they wanted to.
Okay. Pronogo, resident map maker, big part of the map making community. What are the biggest problems with Ancient?
So like I said earlier, I mean, Ancient has this issue where there are no fallback cover positions within the bomb site. You basically have to get into a retake position as soon as the T's breach the site, or you have to just meet them once you're there. Like if you're already there, then that's fine. But and you're also kind of disincentivized to push any farther than you can, even though the rotation, like the timings favor you in the early stages. So if you wanted to do, I was talking about this when I was actually looking at the map, and I think like there's that big ziggurat in the back of B site, which should be called A site, which is really confusing to me still, even months.
Switch the bomb site names for FFS.
Yeah, God seriously. Damn. So yeah, no, B site where the cave spam is. If you go back there, there's a ziggurat. I think you could open that up and make it an actual part of the map instead of just this giant block that you have to walk around. There even looks like these door openings that seem really obvious that you could have at least 1 or 2 of those open up so that you have an area where there's another line of sight there. Then there's actual cover for the CTs to fall back to. Maybe you change up some sight lines as well to make it so that it's not an overpowered angle or whatever. But the bottom line is that Ancient just has this problem where ultimately it's CT sided, not because CTs have interesting decisions to make, but because CTs have very few decisions to make, and it's not even like it's offset by the fact that T's have a lot of decisions to make. It's like neither team can do many interesting things, and so it's just not an interesting map. I think that's the fundamental look on it. And I would like to just point out that it was replaced Train, another map that everybody said was CT sided, and I would agree, the stats bear that out. You know, you could have some very powerful CT sides there, but CTs had to do interesting things, and T's could do interesting things to get advantages, and you could really see what a better Train T side looked like compared to, you know, something else. Whereas it feels like no matter who you are, with very few exceptions, there is no way you can have a better T side Ancient if the CT side on the other side is remotely competent. It just feels it's not. Again, I think think the biggest issue is it's not compelling to play or to watch. And it replaced a map that was compelling to play and watch. And I didn't see very many complaints, anecdotally or whatever, about Train being stale or anything like that. If anything, this was in the height of Vertigo's hate. Remember that people kept saying, Overpass, what a bad map it was at the beginning, but it's become one of the best. Yeah, but between Overpass and Ancient was Vertigo, which is still terrible, and it's been terrible for a while, and it's been years of terrible for Vertigo. And yet we get Ancient, and it's just the same thing. Like, come on, man. Come on. So that's my rant.
I've almost been Stockholm syndromed into liking Vertigo just a little bit more over the course of, the year and a half that it's been playing out. Just because it's not Ancient anymore. Just because it's not Ancient, I like Vertigo. Also, I think I want to bring this up. Like, this is for a viewer thing, because I just have to sit in green rooms and just watch games all day. Like. Dude, Ancient's not even that pretty to look at, man. Like, there's so many more. I was talking to James Bardolph about this, that there's so many different color palettes that are in kind of Mexican, Mayan culture that would make this map pop out so much more. Like, imagine if they threw some turquoise or some, like, because they're just it's just a dark drab green, and instead, like,
I will say that at least Vertigo is like a really pretty map.
Yes, it looks better. It looks a lot better, and I really wish that they just had more lighting options, or just like everything is just dark, kind of viney, kind of overrun. And I get kind of that's not even necessarily true to Mexico, where they're trying to make it, this Aztec Mayan ruins. There's a lot of other colors that they used, so like. That's just not even related to what's wrong with the map in terms of design.
Well, it is, because they're agent skins, and I can't see shit. So change map, please.
Oh, yeah.
It does matter. When I'm watching a fucking game, I want it to look nice. I just want to be staring at green.
The Inferno facelift that they gave was amazing. They made so many colors popped out. Like it's just a map that invokes so much more like wow factor, because it's like, oh, the fights that are happening in different areas, you can instantly recognize based off of the colors in it that something is going on in a new part of the map. Whereas if I'm looking at an Ancient game, it's just like, bro, this is just dark green. It's also dark green over there. Oh, there's a little bit of wood. But like, it's like if you drop a newbie into a different part of Ancient and just say, like, look at the ground, the ground looks the same everywhere on Ancient, other than like the top mid area, or like if there's candles by your feet. That's basically the only difference. If there's just candles, no candles.
Holding
that's all
a
you
vigil,
get.
Yeah. No, I mean, the most interesting parts visually of Ancient are the bridge that you can't traverse on, and
you can't even go anywhere.
In the T-spawn, there's like an organic-looking rock waterfall that you also can't traverse on. So great, like the good eye candy there is just not even interactionable. The other thing I'll just say very quickly is that if you guys are talking about map visuals, just load up Iris, which is in the game right now. Look up Sub-Zero by FM Pone, same guy who put together Cash's update. Like these maps have actual production value to them. I'm not saying that Ancient doesn't. It's very demanding on everybody's CPU, so they should know it's obviously a map with a lot of effort put into it. It just doesn't. It didn't work out, man. Failed experiment. And normally failed experiments are just called failed experiments, and then we move on to something better. But in CSGO, we have to get, again, Stockholm syndrome to liking another failed experiment until this one gets out, which is probably years from now. So, whatever.
Okay, all right. That's our entire hate boner for Ancient laid out on the table. Let's talk about something that's kind of good in the scene. This is, I think, a lot of TOs are adopting this, I mean, and I think that 12.5k OT is probably, without changing loss bonus money or anything like that, it's probably right now the best way to go with this. Do you guys think that 12.5k has been like refreshing compared to the alternatives?
Better than 10k, and that's all I care about.
Yeah,
I just don't want 10k.
10k
literally
is trash. Yeah. Snappi, does 12.5 feel a lot better?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a pretty decent number. You obviously, if a team wins around, they can still kind of abuse the fact that you have more weapons. But at the end of the day, it barely matters now when you have those two gone. Like with the thing that you could shoot people through the door. So at this point, it doesn't really matter almost if it's 12.5 or 16k. 12.5 is obviously better if there comes a new map where you can suddenly abuse it. But yeah, I think 10k is not great, so 12.5k is probably a golden number going forward, right?
Yeah. The only thing I see like people do is like I've seen Elige do it a few times, and it makes me mad because He'll just like buy an op and just like juggle
Yeah,
the
he'll
guns
juggle
over.
it.
But it
Mhm.
makes me so mad because I feel like he hasn't actually gotten to use the op like one time, and
I don't know if I've ever seen him get the op kill.
I really want to see
Interesting.
Elige be tested with the op, and it's my fantasy right now.
Maybe you should just get an AUG and an A1-s. You know, that's actually, I feel like that's actually more relevant than like for Elige's sake, at least. Okay, that was a very short topic, and I want to bring up now another thing that Snappi and I have talked about in DMs and on Snake and Banter as well. The way that basically HLTV stats and I'd say all stats kind of they don't really reflect the ops true like impact in the game, or like kind of its cost, like the cost benefit of using an op. Snappi, I kind of want you to restate what you said before, where it's kind of like the money, the resources put into it. Like how do the stats basically not inflect what the op is doing or the resources put into it?
Yeah, I think my point was on Snake and Bandit that like people are saying obviously that the AWP is overrated because we have a lot of AWPers in the top 20, and in general AWPers have very great stats, right? And my counterpoint is that when a weapon costs almost double of an AK, it obviously needs to be better. But it's not reflected in the numbers. So if you put 30,000, like let's say during a T half, put $25,000 of equipment, AKs, armor, whatever, into one player, and you put 45,000 into another player because you give him AWP, you give every single time, you make sure he has an AWP, he has whatever he needs, right? Then you cannot expect the same output, and it's like when you then compare the numbers, you're pretty much comparing bananas to oranges or apples. You know, you can't
Apples to
do
oranges,
that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like apples, that's how it is. And yeah. But overall, in statistics, that's like it's just a wrong way of calculating statistics. Coming from a background of statistics with my degree from university. However, what they then do is they just the exact value of a kill for whatever weapon you have is the exact same. And my problem with that is like AWPers should not be compared, which I said to you, to a rifler. Like if you want to have like an opening kill rating, you need to take the average of all the AWPers in the HLTV database. They could easily calculate what is the average CT AWP entry rate, like 0.13 maybe. Let's just say that.
Mhm.
Then that's what you need to compare AWPers to. You shouldn't compare them to something else, and that's my main problem with it. And the problem is that people think that now the AWP is overrated, which it is not, because it's like I think you probably get more value in most cases out of getting 2 AKs rather than one AWP.
It's not the gun's fault that the like top 20 list puts a lot of AWPers in it. It's
exactly.
Yeah, okay. So would you want to see maybe like a coefficient to attach itself to, if someone's opping in a round, do they deserve like a 0.95 kind of like multiply what they're doing in that round
Just
by
needs
that?
to take the average of the weapon and then compare it to the average. That's it. It's pretty simple in my opinion how you do it.
Like a
Obviously,
section comparing AWPers to other AWPers.
nah, but
specifically?
like when you see like a kill, then you see okay, it was made by the AWP. This is the entry kill. Then you compare that entry kill to all the other AWP. Like, what is the average of an AWP getting an entry on a CT site? That's what it should be compared to.
Okay.
And obviously, it's more advanced statistics, but eventually it will come to CS also, like in all other sports. It's just a matter of time, and probably HLTV will do it in like 3, 4, 5 years. What do I know? But also, like just in general, attaching economy into the numbers would be good at this point, because right now it gives you way more rating farming 5 guys with an MP9 due to multi-kill factor, impact rating, and win round share. No, sorry, the fact that you win the round compared to a guy who with an M4 kills 2 kills 3 times and 2 of the rounds are lost. But it gives you way more to farm that eco-ways rating wise, and that's obviously an issue. It's a flaw, right? And I think adding economy and like adjusting for certain things like weighing the weapons up against each other is obviously the right way to go. Going forward, if you want to do it even more advanced, you would do it with heat maps also, so that you would also not suddenly compare connector players to B Mirage players. Then you would do heat maps of what is the average of killing in the connector position, and then you would again compare positions to positions in a way. So you kind of get scored out of like where you get the kill, how early. And obviously no stats will ever be perfect, and it can be flawed. It can be kind of like you can still probably learn how to play for it in a way. But right now it's too. You could make it easily better, I would think. Maybe it's not that easy. I'm probably not the expert on how easy it actually is to create it, but in my mind, it seems like some of the things seems pretty straightforward.
There's definitely improvements that can be made to the overall system for sure. I think I don't know if there's any plans for it, but I think at some point like a rating 3.0 that includes stuff like the economy impact and like a coefficient of the op in terms of comparing it to others would be a good change. I don't know if that's actually in the plans or if there's something incoming with that. I'm not involved in that whatsoever. But I think those are generally just good ideas. The one about positional rating is a little bit harder to sell, I would say. Like it would be good as its own stat, but it shouldn't really involve in like an overall rating category just because players shift their positions round to round as well. Like not a connector player isn't always going to be there.
No, but that's why you do it based on the heat map. You see where the kill is coming from. So
Yeah.
you don't compare, like, it doesn't matter if a guy is playing B5 rounds and 5 rounds in connector then. So you base it based on where the kill is coming from.
Gotcha.
What time in the round, like stuff like this. Obviously, this is very advanced and it's not going to be here for a long period. But I think that's the next step if you really want to go into depth.
My brain is exploding thinking about how much machine learning would be necessary to just make a map that.
I mean, it will be here. It's just a matter of time.
It'll happen. It's kind of like, oh, if a guy in connector dies, how much impact is that going to have on like the losing probability? How is that going to change the probability that a person's going to win or lose the round, or a team that is? So there's going to be like more impactful positions. I think I don't know if you've seen this guy's work, but ENCE, I'm pretty sure, was the guy that did it. He was on like a couple Thorin shows, but basically he's like a guy that I think just kind of CS is his hobby. But he made a blog post about all the positions on Mirage and basically which are the strongest, which are basically expected to find multi-kill value. So like, for example, in what he analyzed from like all the Pro League demos, like he fed him through his like whatever his algorithm or whatever was, he found out like top balcony was on A, like out of Palace. On A, Mirage was like the strongest spot. Like you're more likely than anywhere else to get 2 kills from there. This was like 2 seasons of Pro League ago, but like it's kind of cool to see how the meta changes for positions. And
it actually makes sense, because if you're playing there, you usually would have a guy baiting for you, right? You're not gonna pick that position if you're just gonna stand there alone. So that by default makes it a higher probability of getting a multi-kill, because it's very rare you see an A player there without any backup, right?
It's not just a place you play solo.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Right.
I mean, also, Snappi, to your point of the overall investment into an opper versus a rifler, do you think that dying with the op or dying as a primary opper should also impact your stats more?
No, not necessarily, but I do think it's just like, to me, it's not even about like, obviously you could argue that like an overall rating score by the end of the match should also kind of be impacted by how much value is spent within a certain player on a half. But I think it's more about like just comparing like certain, like especially an AWPer to an AWPer, and maybe give higher impacts to a deagle kill on an eco round, like pretty much looking at the difference in equipment from like one player taking down another player.
The other thing that I makes me think about in general is that this is almost like in this way, stats can have the same problem as like accreditations in general, like a college degree from something, where if basically the stat is what we're mostly interested in, if a stat is what secures somebody a contract, if a stat is what gets people ahead career-wise, then really at that point it's being treated like the answer as opposed to like a question. And I feel like there's still value in, even if everybody adopted the idea that, okay, stats aren't the answer, stats are the question. Let's see how valid these stats are. It's still valuable to get the stats to be improved in general. But I do think that generally speaking, there is a bit of a problem with some of the entry level enthusiasts who just say, oh, this player is good. You say, well, he's got this rating, so I think not, or whatever. And that's kind of the same thing as saying, oh, this person has good ideas. Well, he doesn't have a college degree, so bye. Like it's kind of like missing the point in a way. Obviously, there's way more different about those two examples, but in that way, I feel like they are very similar. And you kind of have to say like, okay, well, what was your thesis? What did you study? Like you have to go deeper in that sense to see like what's going on. And if the stat holds up to sort of passes muster, that's why I think it's good to have these kinds of conversations to talk about stats in general, because that will give us better equipment to ask more interesting questions and come to more interesting conclusions. And I just wanted to comment on that just because I feel like there have been at least been reports, and maybe it's all in jest, that like, oh, this guy bumped up his rating just in time for his contract negotiation. Who knows what's actually going on there? But.
Robs.
I do think it'd be nice to see. I do think it'd be nice to see certain stats sort of become more, and they have been on broadcast recently more than they used to for sure. But just in general, in terms of talking points for the casual viewers, stuff like KPR, DPR, multi kills. Like a lot of these sort of things could be talked about a lot more than just looking at someone's rating and saying like, oh, this player has a 1.01 rating, they're dog shit compared to this 1.3 rated player. Like it's such a surface level of analyzing that people just go onto an HLTV page or they go onto a player's stat page and then they pull that single number and don't actually look at anything further. Like as you were saying, in terms of the positions they play, in terms of just their overall level of impact in certain rounds, like flash assists, a lot of different like stuff that doesn't generally get brought to the forefront unless you actually dig into it. And I think those sort of stats could be a lot more upfront in a way that is a little bit more presentable. Because like even if you look at like NBA stats, there's it's a lot easier to like sift through a couple of those for players just in terms of looking at an overall match that was played. So I think there's definitely improvements that could be made in that aspect.
I think KPR and DPR on broadcast is really hard to contextualize. If we were used as like a percentile, it would be so much better. Like basically, like I know when I look at Smoothie's DPR, which is like 0.68, I'm like, that's really high. But I know an average fan viewer is not gonna understand how like a Shiro number is like a 0.56 DPR. Like so if they were like. Yeah, like especially like given the role, like if the role were simplified as much as like, because right now I don't think we're there yet that we're gonna be like connector player, like window player, like whatever player, just like opper versus not opper, like those kind like opping stats could be like very simplified in terms of getting percentiles. Like Snappi said, just get the average of all the oppers for whatever the stat is, and then you can spit something out that's a little bit more focused in terms of like their opening kill rating, which is obviously going to be higher if you're an opper, unless you're trash. So because I am on a limited time though, this is a great discussion, but I kind of want to just keep it moving on. We have like 3 patron questions that we have to get to, and then I kind of want to bring it back to maybe some other discussion topics. So let's just hop into the patron questions now to make sure we don't miss these ones. So Pranogo, do you have it up? Do you got it up?
I do.
Okay, so let's do the first one. Nick DiGi, new patron, says, do you think a team can have long-term success with a roster where neither the IGL or coach are the captain of that team? That is to say that the team's leader of men character, like the moral leader, is not the IGL or coach. Snappi, what do you think about this? Can a team have a... Yeah.
I'm not sure, but isn't Simple the captain of Na'Vi? So if that's the case, you already got the answer at least.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I guess that's already the simplest answer.
I was going to bring up maybe even like... I don't know if it'd probably be on the same level, but I was going to say Liquid with Stewie. The Grand Slam lineup of Liquid with Stewie, Nitro, and Dren. Yeah. I'd probably consider Stewie the leader of men character on that team.
Yeah, so there's already been multiple examples of this working.
Yeah, I think it can work as long as whoever that character is, like the leader of men character, isn't like controlling the roster as well. You know what I mean?
As long as it's not Alo, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
So as long as whoever that is doesn't have roster control and isn't making all the decisions, then I think long term it can definitely work.
Okay,
Yeah,
I think that's pretty
Yep.
pretty answered. Let's do Slumpnessmonster has the question. Considering YEKINDAR speaks great English, if he were to leave VP, what team would you like to see him join? If you replace Rain on FaZe, I think they would truly be a super team. Well, he
That
already
might be
gave
too much.
he gave one
Kind
idea
of
right there.
topical, unfortunately.
I think the problem with that change would probably be on a lot of maps. YEKINDAR is like used to being star player, I would say, on most maps. But now they have Twist and Robs. Like, would they be able to they would be able to sacrifice one of them into playing weaker roles, I think. But in general, YEKINDAR is such a good player that he would obviously be interesting to every international team. Like every international team would at least consider, should we do something? Most teams would probably like not, because it's after the player changes. We are mid-season. But he is such a skilled player that you would have to consider it. It's like suddenly if like a guy like Nico suddenly becomes available on the market, right?
Mhm.
You have to just consider it, and
Yeah, you
most
have to
teams would
talk about
probably
it.
jump on it, right? And I think it would probably be not to the same degree as Nico with YEKINDAR, but it would be close.
I think another one, obviously, like to your point, it would be a lot of stars on one team in terms of role overlap, but like YEKINDAR for Jax would also be
Ooh.
a move that would be ridiculous to see.
I think that would be one. That would be an even worse fit than YEKINDAR for
Yeah, but
Rain.
the thing is, I think Jax
It
is so
would.
underrated, man. Because first of all, he has like his personality seems so fucking
Yes.
awesome, and not only that, but he actually is the sacrificial lamb on both sides, both T and
Yeah.
CT. CT
Right.
plays usually with the worst positions, and on T side, they just throw him in, like, and that's something that's actually pretty valuable, I would say, because it creates space for everyone else in the team.
Yeah, I don't think
I
G2
think
or
he's
FaZe are
underrated.
like the two slots I would put YEKINDAR into. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think he fits for Jax or Rain. Like, maybe Rain, but even then, like, that could fall apart in some ways because you
Mhm.
definitely wouldn't have a stable as a team. Because Twist, I'm pretty sure, would have to like make some drastic rule changes again, which probably would kind of suck for him considering that's the whole reason he left Liquid. So I just muted myself on accident, but yeah.
There you
Yeah,
go.
he's
What if
obviously such a
Maus
good player. He
add
would be good
YEKINDAR
everywhere.
and JKS and remove 2 players?
That I guess that'd be okay. That'd be all right. I don't know. I don't know the leader. I'm like not sold on the leadership of Maus personally. You know
I mean, I don't think anyone is right now,
Yeah.
to be
So
fair.
What about like an NA team like EG or something? I know you guys mentioned Liquid earlier, but
yeah.
it seems like a
well,
big downgrade no matter where he goes outside of VP. Like he can't. I don't think he can go up. People would say G2, but like we just discussed, it's probably not a good idea. Or it doesn't. It's not a clear upgrade. There is going to be some loss and some adjustments, right? But I feel like EG, he could probably just be an upgrade for somebody.
Yeah, it's really tough to find a team for him.
Yeah.
Personally,
This
I
is
guess
the same
NA
problem we
team
had with
is a-
JKS last episode. If you guys remember, we were like, "Oh yeah, JKS, he's a
Yeah.
great player. He should definitely be on some team." And then we looked down, and it's like,
But I mean, he would like. I'm certain he would get like multiple offers from top
Yeah.
20 teams. But it would be. I don't know if there would be any team he would fit into perfectly. But he definitely would get the offer still because he's such a good player.
To an NA team, you say Pernogo. How about he goes and plays with NA's best stopper, Exotic, on Choco Check?
You had to say
Not
that.
bad.
I thought you were going to say Pwn alone. Come on, dude.
Snappy, I want to put you on the spot. If YEKINDAR and if YEKINDAR and JKS are both on the free agent market, who is more valuable to more teams? Just generally
YEKINDAR,
speaking.
of course. YEKINDAR.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Like, there's
And
no
then there's,
doubt.
like,
That's
pure
not a bash
skill.
against JKS, but like YEKINDAR is literally a top 10 player in the world, like, at least close to.
Not only
And
that,
he's
but
been
he's just
showing it for the last 2 years, where JKS have had a good tournament now, and he is a good player, and I think JKS deserves a top team. But YEKINDAR is just more valuable at the moment. There's no doubt.
He's also
Just
more
wanted you to
valuable
say
because
that.
he just adds like a completely different play style that's like pretty difficult to actually find.
It's very hard to find these very aggressive, high impact players. I think it's hard to find a YEKINDAR. It's also hard to find a player like JKS, but there is more players that can go and play passive lurk roles rather than what YEKINDAR does, because it's much more intuition in a way.
Yeah, I almost would compare it like this. Floppy is closer to JKS than YEKINDAR is to config. Like I think the gap between like JKS and Floppy, it's there. It's obviously there, but it's not huge. But the gap between YEKINDAR and config is actually pretty big in terms of consistency. Like the fact that YEKINDAR can find consistency doing his role is just bonkers. Like that's just insane to me. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Okay, next question. This I don't want to answer this one. Adam asks, do you think Magisk will eventually take over IGLing on Vitality?
I don't know. I really rate Apex, but I mean, I don't know that I'd bet on it, but I could see a world where it happens.
Loads of people were predicting Vitality to win this upcoming Antwerp major. I was pretty sure there's going to be some growing pains for this team when it was first announced. It was a very exciting project. It does feel like an obvious... Here's the problem, is that when Magisk joins, I'm imagining he has this in the back of his head, like, well, if it doesn't work out, maybe I can IGL the way that I did on Astralis. Here's the problem is, even if he was only like sort of considering that, everybody in the whole CS scene has said, when is Magisk doing this? Is Magisk going to do this? What's going to happen? What could he do this? So he's like... It's definitely a narrative that's gotten into his head by now. Like, he's definitely thinking, oh, it could be a fallback, even if he wasn't seriously considering it before. So, yeah, without knowing what the internal politics are.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I still feel like things would have to go, like, really poorly for them to do that. I kind of doubt Magisk is just, like, itching the fucking IGL.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. That wouldn't really
I
make
would
sense
say,
to me,
I would say another 4 to 5 months if they aren't actually getting any results, then it might be something that they consider. But it'll take a substantial amount of time where they're not able to actually find any success, or they're getting early group stage exits or something like that. It would have to be something drastic for them to actually like start shifting in that direction, because I do think Apex is a pretty good IGL in terms of what he can bring. Also, to your point, I don't think that they will be able to win Antwerp for sure, just with the level of teams that are currently there and what they've shown so far. Like, to me, it seems they're still at least another 4 months away from being able to consistently sort of take down some of the world's best teams like Navi G2. It just isn't going to quite reach that level for a couple more months. Their comms seemed like a little bit hectic in a lot of the segments that were shown. They seemed a little bit uncoordinated in certain rounds, and that sort of stuff obviously takes time to improve. Not that they won't, but it's still a little while away, in my opinion.
I think Vitality is going to be number 1 in the world at one point this year.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think
they definitely
have
can.
Such a good lineup. So, and I think Apex is a good in-game leader. I don't think they have a bad player, and then they have one of the best players on top of that. So
yeah. I think the only way that Magisk IGLs for Vitality is like 3 years from now, Apex retires and Magisk says, "All right, I'll do it." That's my call on them. I don't think there's any way they replace Apex as an in-game leader. I think he's proved himself multiple times now that he is actually a good leader. I mean, you watch the development from when he first was the IGL to what he's doing now with the team. Don't take what they just did at Katowice necessarily, but beyond that, or before that, like IEM Winter, oh my, like they were the clear second best team, or like behind Navi, it felt like with their Winter win.
But also, like, it was 1 month into the project and Sonic wasn't even there. Like, it's not really that easy of a time.
Mm-hmm.
So
also to that point, like Ziwu just historically doesn't play well at Katowice, and he didn't play too well at this tournament compared to his overall level. So they can definitely. It's not really a clear picture of what they're like as a team in a typical environment.
Yeah, I think Katowice had this issue where something overshadowed the Vitality, like the stars aligning against Vitality, because right after that we had the whole like business in Eastern Europe. So everybody was talking about the more like CIS squads, and it's like, oh well, there's a cloud hanging over them. But I think the same thing happened with Vitality here. It's like not only did ZywOo underperform to like one of the most ridiculous levels we've seen in an individual match, but Zonic wasn't even there until I think that match maybe, or at least till the last match that they had. It's like, come on, man.
he
like,
only showed up then.
Yeah, there's a lot of asterisks next to that performance, and they still, were maybe not almost made it, but they were in contentions to get to the arena. So. Yeah,
the air quality is notoriously bad in Katowice, and ZywOo likes his daily walks, so that's a shame for him. It's okay. Let's see. We got EasyPete with a question. Any tier 2 IGLs that you would like to see in tier 1 teams?
JT on the come up.
JT,
the obvious one.
You think they're so you're saying complexity's tier 2?
Yeah, they're the number one NA team.
Just for now.
Dude, come on.
From Sky.
Bird from Sky. That's my
Bird from Sky.
Dude, Bird
That
from
is our-
Sky.
To be
That
honest,
is our-
I think he's actually a good in-game leader.
That is our cult hero.
Like, I
on
don't
this-
even like. I think it's a meme at this point, but I don't even like. I actually like the way they play CS.
Dude,
No, I
they're
agree. I
so
actually
good.
do think he is a good call. Like, I don't know anything about him personally, but just from like having played them a couple times, and like prep for them, I do think they have like a really, he has like a really solid mind for the game. He seems to have like a really good system under there.
Yeah. I was gonna say Bird from Sky, so I don't even know now. Like that's my call. That was my call.
Sorry.
No, I mean that's fine. That's fine. We can have the same pick there. I think that'll do it for patron questions. Unless Note and Pronoga. Do you guys have anybody else other than Radar from Sky? No, just kidding. Just kidding. No, it's actually effed up that people say that about them. But yeah,
only one person has said that about them, as far as I'm concerned. Only one. And he's not going to any events anytime soon, nor is his whole country. So.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Jesus.
Oh my lord. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Okay, so I've got about 12 minutes before I got to dip out. I do want to. I said I was so bored of recaps, but you know what? You guys watched it. We all kind of talked. We all saw it. I mean, Katowice Grand Finals, G2. FaZe. These teams. You know them. You love them. But what do you guys see? How about I'll frame it like this: is FaZe going to keep winning tournaments? Is FaZe going to keep winning?
See, that's the question.
Are they a top 2 team? Is FaZe a top 2 team?
You see,
they have. No, you can go.
No, so I was gonna say, I do think they will consistently be up there, but I am a little bit hesitant to decide how much stock I actually put into this run because I want to see them actually play with Rain. Because the thing with like JKS coming in and playing, right, is that obviously it's playing with a stand-in, but a guy like JKS, it's easier for him to fit into a role like Rain's just as a stand-in because there's not as much pressure there. He's kind of just playing. He can kind of do there's not as much pressure to play well, so it's a lot easier to kind of like fill into just whatever role, I think, and for the team to kind of just roll with it. And so I'm curious to see how they perform with Rain, when they don't have that kind of thing going for them, or whatever they choose to do after this. But I do think FaZe will consistently be like top 3 around there. I think with Rops and Twists and with Brokey like hitting like another level, then I think they'll consistently be up there.
I don't think there's any doubt that they will be a top team. But there's 2 things which you also kind of have to consider with this run. And the first one was that they were 21-11 in the pistols, and they won 90% of the second rounds, which means they had 19 good starts just by the pistols. Then they had 54% on second rounds. So out of 30 map starts, half staffs, they had 25 good starts where they got the economy rolling.
54% break? Was that
the
break?
second round,
they had
they
like 70% break.
They had
before the playoffs as well.
They had 54% rounds on the second round. When they lost pistol, they won 54. So basically, out of 30 halves, they had 25 good half starts, and that actually really matters. And especially if you look at some of the maps that were really close, like getting 2 good half starts, definitely matter.
Yeah.
So there's that thing, and then there is obviously also the thing that's a bit touchy at the moment, that like who knows, again, as we said, where were the heads of those CIS teams? Like it's it was a horrible situation to be in. Like if it was me, I wouldn't be looking at Counter, I would be looking at the news, or like my messenger, and obviously that has to be taken. But there's obviously no doubt that FaZe is going to be a top team this year. They simply have too good an in-game leader, too good players to not be a top team. But they also had some factors that it's not consistent to be able to get 25 good half starts in 30 halves. That's just not going to happen.
I mean, one other thing is Brokey had a really, really sick event. In general, he's getting better as he goes. He did say in one of the interviews, I think, that he changed some stuff in his game and he was playing like slightly differently than he was before. So to points we've made before on the shows, like when AWPers like that are changing up what they're doing in game, like it takes a little bit for teams to start countering what they've changed. So that could have an impact going forward. In general, I agree with the sentiment that they are just going to continue being a top team, though I don't think that that's really a question. Specifically for the grand final, one to our point with Vitality even is that FaZe or G2 didn't have Xtaz on stage with them, which a lot of those like late crumbles that they had in these overtime matches and the comeback that FaZe had, I think that had a pretty substantial impact in terms of just how mentally stable they were in those games. That Xtaz would have made a pretty big difference. So I think that's something that we definitely have to keep in mind when we look back on this event as well.
I went back and I wanted to look like that Inferno game. I cannot fucking believe G2 lost that Inferno game. Like even on their CT side, the only they lost like 4 rounds or something, and like 2 of the rounds they lost were ecos, where they just lost them because they had like one guy just fighting alone in banana, which is just I don't know, just really dumb things to lose to. Just not playing like as safe as they could. So just losing B with like one person playing against ecos, and then like their Inferno like T side rounds, like there were so many that like they could have easily closed out just with like one kill that just goes their way. But so many times like they just kept choking all these close rounds. Like for the most part on that T side, they would have like control like early in their defaults, like they felt comfortable. And then once it got to like 15-15, once they lost that last overtime round, like the game was just completely gone from them.
I mean, they would have won Inferno if Rops didn't do that like ace fucking thing. I mean so there's moments where you have to, I mean, give credit to people like Robs for pulling shit off like that. That was insane. I think he's actually finally properly rated as a player as opposed to overrated as fuck. But no, I think, I mean, that's I mean, the thing is that G2 did lose those other maps and they weren't like convincing losses or anything by any means, but those are, I think the Xtaz point is huge. That's kind of what I was like going to bring this back to. The fact that if you have your coach instead of Almanac, like what the actually why is Almanac there? Why in the hell is Almanac even at the event? Like who flew? Did they fly him out just to stand behind them? Like that was the weirdest thing ever to me, honestly.
I think he was a registered substitute.
Okay, so he was just So he just was at the event, or did they fly him out after they knew the X test?
He's probably there as an audience member at least. Come on, dude.
He's just going to hang out.
I assume at this point, especially to like big events, a team like G2 would bring a guy that they have like on the bench just with them, a guy like Dominic.
Yeah. Okay.
Just with COVID and everything, like we've seen, like
true.
It just at the last second
happens.
you could just lose a player.
Is that an awkward
someone
flight?
like Dominic.
You think he's like up in coach while everybody else is in business?
Maybe
you're on the bench, buddy.
If they have something in his clause for his contract that he gets paid more than his bench money for going, then at least it seems kind of fair in some ways. Okay. I have only a few more minutes
for me to butt in here, or is that it?
Yeah. Go for it. One more point, and then we'll do shoutouts.
Okay, you got it. So I'll just say, if you believe that the CIS squads, in particular Na'Vi, are going to continue to be either unable to compete or just underperform for the next little bit, if this is the end of the almost Na'Vi era, with the same way that we got teased with the Liquid era before the major back in 2019, I will say this is probably the beginning of the parity era. Again, round 2 or 3 or however many it's been now. We've got FaZe contesting even with stand-ins. Again, to Snappi's point about the percentages and everybody else's point about strength of rosters without coaches. Yeah, we're probably looking at something where it's like, they're not going to be top 1 or 2, but they'll be in the running for top 5 for sure. They'll be contesting. They'll be in deep playoff runs. I think that's there's almost no question about that. When Vitality comes online, when G2 find more consistency with Mauisnake and with their actual coach, I think we're going to see a lot of teams competing, and Antwerp will be exciting, even if, for whatever bizarre reason, Navi shits the bed completely. Like, we'll still have loads of teams. It won't be as satisfying a story, but there will be still, like, this final proved that the final can go 3-0 in a best of 5 and still be really exciting the whole way through with teams that previously we weren't talking about. Well, I guess G2 was in the final, but like, you know, we weren't talking about this particular matchup as being super exciting. It broke some viewership records, allegedly. We don't know what's all with that about, but you know, people were paying attention, and that's really exciting and good for the scene overall, that this major is going to deliver basically no matter what, as long as, you know, PGL audio.
Huh. Okay, had to finish off with that, right? So let's do shout outs now. Mix, you're gonna be always first forever now, because shout outs are always like
I'm going a bit different today. My shout out is to Heroic for choking in semis again.
Oh my god, wow, that's a little toxic, I see. All right. No, what have you got for your shout out?
I didn't have anything pre-prepared here, so shout out Snappi for coming on. It's fun talking.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Snappi. What? Anything you want to shout out? It could be a player, website, your Twitter, whatever the hell you.
Ooh.
What do you? Yeah.
Shout out to ENCE.
All right.
That's the main thing.
Clean. That's a clean one. Okay. Pronogo, what's your shout out?
I'll just say shout out Thorin for coming on my show. That's a shill shout out. It's actually, if you like this kind of topic where we went through the meta, it's very heavily based on that. So if you want more of this, you got it. And if you don't, see ya. That's my shout out.
Okay. My shout out is a question to note. What is the blue drink you're drinking?
So usually I have coffee in the morning, but I didn't have time before the show started today to make it. My roommates finished it all, so this time it's this little bit of G Fuel I had left over from like
G-Fuel.
a year ago.
G Fuel.
Real
Shout out G Fuel then.
Literally never drink it, but
shout out
I
G
needed
Fuel.
caffeine.
Just
Surely
kidding.
our podcast is sponsored by G Fuel. Everyone.
Surely we should get a G Fuel freaking code, right? Like, something's got to come our way. Like, okay, all right, I'll reach out to G Fuel. Actually, no, you should reach out to G Fuel because you're the one drinking their beverage, you know, man.
Clearly.
Okay, all right, I do have to go, but thank you, Snappi, so much for coming on. You've been an excellent guest on 2 shows that I'm in now, so really appreciate that. And Snappi, best of luck to you in your group. We will probably not discuss that with you, but as a team in the near future, as a It's Server Time team. But really appreciated your insight on all of these questions regarding the meta of Counter-Strike. Fantastic episode. And thanks to all the viewers, thanks to all the people that subbed in chat, and thanks to all the patrons. And I think we can send it off at this point.